Welcome back to the show. Now, if you are curious about whether paid ads would be beneficial for growing your coaching business, but you're unsure because you've heard that ads don't work anymore, or you've heard somebody's horror story about how they lost thousands of dollars to an ad campaign gone wrong. So if any of that sounds familiar, then this episode is for you. My guest today is Christina Bernhardt, and Christina owns a Facebook ads agency for coaches, and she specifically works with coaches who are ready to scale their coaching businesses to the next level. Christina spent years working in the corporate world, building a marketing department at a law firm, but she found herself dreaming of the freedom to travel where she wanted while doing what she loved. So she found a way to navigate through her own limiting beliefs to leave the corporate world and build her business and trade all her things for a backpack of clothes to travel the world. So now at her home base in Austin, Texas, she carries out her mission to help coaches get their important work out into the world and create a ripple effect of impact through paid media. I think that you're going to love listening into our conversation about the potential rewards that paid ads can bring your business and the myths around Facebook ads and the mistakes that she sees people making and what to do instead, and so much more. Well, hey, Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited to dive into all things advertising with you today. This is just going to be so juicy because, a lot of things have changed about ads recently. And I mean, I think a lot of people felt pretty confused about ads before, recent changes happened. So, even more so now, right? Like it's just a very confusing land. And so I am looking forward to being able to clear up some of that confusion with people and really get some clarity about ads and whether they should be, advertising their business and how to go about it and all those things. But before we get into all of that stuff, for context, I would love for you to give our audience, just a bit of an introduction. Just tell them about you and the work that you do.
Sure. So I am Christina, and I started with ads in the corporate world, actually. I was a marketing director at a law firm, and we actually spent six figures a month on just Facebook ads. We did kind of everything. So it was a great learning experience. And I learned so much there. And then definitely I realized quickly that working for someone else was just not like I just don't fit. So I went out on my own in 2020. So I left that. I started the agency, and we've just been going strong ever since. And I will say I started ads in 2015. And the last 2 years, there have been more crazy changes than the past 7 years, for sure. So it's been really, really insane. But really exciting for me if you like nerd out on this stuff and like love a challenge, but not so exciting for everyone else. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic because my hope is that we can help people from preventing them from having a terrible experience, because there are some things that you need to know before going into ads. And there's a good time and a bad time. And just hope to kind of like reveal like, anything that's not very clear to people. And just most importantly, prevent any like horrible experiences.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I know that is the fear of that is definitely a big thing that I think prevents a lot of people from getting started with ads. So
Absolutely.
if we can prevent some of those problems right from the get-go, that's a very valuable thing to do. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like with all of the changes, especially recently, and how it just, and I'm, it's going to keep changing, I expect, and, it's just something to keep on top of. But do you think that given the way that it is currently, do you think that ads are still worth it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people are wondering. And the answer is short and simple: absolutely yes. But it's yes for specific reasons. So, I mean, for one thing, wherever your ideal client is, wherever that attention is, it's always going to be a good idea to be where they are. And there's no doubt that there's a lot of attention on social media. A lot of us spend a lot of time on social media, maybe even more so than we want to. Like that's a thing.
Yes.
It's definitely where people are. So as long as the ad product is good, which Facebook ads and Instagram ads is a really great ad product. And the attention is there. It's always going to be a good idea. It just comes down to, do you understand how to use the tool? And is what you're putting out there something that is actually selling?
Yes, absolutely agreed. And actually, let's just back up the bus for just a second because we said ads, but primarily we're talking about, and in this situation, mostly talking about Facebook and Instagram ads, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is other places where people can advertise, but I think that
Mhm.
that's what most people think of when they start thinking of ads for their business. And it's what most people are doing. So, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, absolutely worth it with a few caveats, right?
Very important ones.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of those things that people need to be aware of, like, so that eyes are wide open going into this?
Yeah. So the first biggest thing is that your offers are actually selling. There is this idea and this beautiful picture that has been painted that ads will just give you sales, and it's a lot more than that. So if
Right.
you are selling, if your offers are selling organically, there's a good chance that it's going to translate whenever you go into ads. All ads do is they amplify what's already working or not working. So just by putting it in front of more people is not going, like, by volume, it might give you more sales, but might not necessarily give you a return.
Mm,
Just getting it in front of more eyes doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get more sales, because it's not going to sell better than it would organically. If anything, it's a colder audience. So your messaging
mhm.
has to be very dialed in. And that's a really hard thing to do. Now, if you do run ads, you will get data. So sometimes, if organic growth is slow, sometimes you do just need that traffic, but understand, have the expectation that going into it, if you don't actually know if your funnel is converting, if your offers are selling, if your messaging is all dialed in, if you're not for sure about that before you start investing in ads, understand that the return might actually not be monetary, it might be data, which
Mm.
can be extremely valuable, but that expectation is super important to be clear on what might come of this.
Right. That I think going into it with those expectations, I think is so important because I think a lot of people have this misconception, and you tell me if this is your experience too, that like I'm just going to start advertising and then like everybody's going to be there buying. It's going to be like a buying festival of my stuff because I
Yeah.
just need to get eyeballs on it, and it's going to instantly translate. And because there's so much unhelpful messaging out there about the magic of ads and that
Yes.
it can fix all the ills in your problem, just start getting more traffic and everything was going to be fine. But clearly, like, managing your expectations is important, but also, like you said, it's you really need to make sure that you have a clear foundation, is what I'm hearing you say. Your foundation has to be solid before you start adding fuel to the fire with ads. Your offers need to be selling. You need to know that people want what you are selling before you start, amping things up with ads. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I hear so often whenever people get, quote unquote, burned with ads.
Mm.
And it's usually it's an expectation thing. And whenever I do see people paint a picture with ads, I'm like, please put the caveat in there, because it's
Yeah.
really, really important. And whenever you're going into an investment with the expectation of, like, maybe you're hiring a coach and you know that this is going to be a long game, like, your expectations are right. It's not going to be as traumatic as, I'm going to throw in like thousands of dollars into ads and I'm going to make a million, and
Right.
having
Right.
that not work out can be really, really devastating. So it's so important to have this kind of conversation. And I'm always trying to have this conversation, because even as an ads agency owner, I don't want to sign on a client that is not ready for this. It's not fun for us either.
Mhm.
We want you to have great results. And the picture that people paint about what ads can do, it's not that the picture is not real. We take coaches from six-figure marks into seven-figure revenue with ads, but it's when they have that foundation there, and it's just so important that people understand that.
Yeah, I agree totally. Okay. So then as long as you're, approaching it with the right attitude and expectations, when is it actually a good idea to start advertising? I think a lot of people, kind of understand those concepts maybe, but for their own case, like how do you actually personally decide, okay, I'm actually ready. It's a good idea. I need to start venturing into this.
Yeah. So it's a little bit, it's somewhat personalized for what your goals are for your business. If you have this like long-term visionary, this long-term plan that you see for your business and you want to start planting those seeds now, you want to get into list building and start to build something out, but you're not going in with the expectation of I'm going to, put in 1,000 and make 1 million.
Right.
But the perfect scenario, if what you're wanting is a monetary return, the perfect scenario would be that you have an offer and you have a funnel that is converting, and you know your data. And the data that I'm referring to, at minimum, is just like your funnel conversion rate. How many people sign up for your list or sign up for a webinar or something like that, get on your list, and how many of those people actually do purchase at the end? When you have that number, then the only other number you really need to have to keep it simple would be like your cost per lead into that, which
Mm.
you would have to estimate. But you can actually, and I actually have a calculator on my website where you can plug in these numbers if you have them, and see what kind of return you could get. That's going to be the perfect scenario that you are organically selling and it is actually working. And you're at this point where your just organic growth is not as quick as you want, and you want to amplify, you want to like double and triple or whatever it is, the amount of clients that you have, and you're in a really good place for that on the front end and the back end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not about fixing a broken business or like creating a business from scratch that doesn't have anything yet, but it's really more about amplifying a business that's working, but working on a small scale, right? Like needs to be working on a small
Exactly.
scale. When you're there and you've got some data and you've got some numbers and you know what you need to do to make sales, then advertising can just like amplify all of that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is also something that is sort of, it's not new, like this has always been kind of the case, but even more so now. So back in the day, in marketing terms, it's like 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So before, ads were so incredibly cheap. And the data was so strong because this is before the iOS updates.
Right.
This is before the pandemic and the election and all these things that really just turned social media into a whole different kind of environment. Um,
Mhm.
Before that, we could actually be, these are some of the things that have changed, a little bit, like, dare I say, lazy. Like, we could put up an ad and it just kind of worked. And it was so cheap that it just, even if it didn't work that well, it was really easy to get a return. So it
Mm.
wasn't as big of an investment or a risk to jump into ads too soon. And even though it still was, but now it just is even more so. Not only do you have to have your messaging even more dialed in, there's way more advertisers, there's more competition, there's more going on. The CPMs, which is what Facebook charges us to get in front of a certain amount of people, those
Mhm.
are higher, so it's going to be more expensive. So your cost per leads are higher. And all of these factors have just made it where you really do want to be ready and not dive into it too soon, because that return is just harder to get.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially in light of all those recent changes. And I mean, you mentioned risk, and I know I mean, from what I hear from my audience, my community, that is a big reason why people are hesitant to get into the advertising game is because they're concerned about the risk, which I understand. But I would love to actually talk a little bit about the reward, right? Like
Yeah.
what can, because I think that we forget to look at that. So assuming, all the caveats are in place, right? You need to be ready. It needs to be the right timing. You need to do it correctly and all of those things. But can you just give me a little glimpse into like what can advertising actually do for our businesses?
Yeah. So my favorite way to, and I hear other people use this analogy as well, and it's a real thing. And that's where advertising can be an ATM machine. Like, you literally, like, once things are converting and they're going, and you're always just kind of tweaking and optimizing that, and you're staying like really intentional with all of that. It's literally a machine that you put money in and you get more money out. It is the dream life. Is not a pipeline dream. It is real. It actually happens. And that is the amazing thing, because whenever, all of my clients are coaches, and it's so important to us just as much as them to get their work out into the world. Like,
Mhm.
you're well aware, it's very, very important work. The world needs it more than ever now. And it's only going to continue to be more important. And so being able to have that, Like I always explain it like I have the world just kind of in my back pocket. Like I know how to reach your people.
Yeah.
And so we get to, use this amazing tool to connect your work with the people that are looking for you, that need you. And you're just able to have that ripple effect and have that larger impact. So it's monetary. The ATM machine is like a real thing, but also like that impact just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it starts to ripple out even, with through referrals and things like that from how big your community starts to get. So once everything is dialed in, that is the beauty of it. And it is a good reason to get started into it. If you're in a good place for it, it is a long game. So it's not something that you turn it on and then it just happens. Like it takes testing and all of that. But once you're there, it is quite an amazing situation.
Yes. I totally agree with you. Like I just personally want to concur with everything that you said. And I think, the ATM machine analogy is actually completely correct. But it sounds too good to be true, right? And I
Yeah.
think that our natural skepticism and our natural like beware of scams, like red flags start to go
Yeah.
off, the alarm bells go off when we hear that, like, no, that can't possibly be true. But legitimately, that is, once you get the system set up right, and it really legitimately is that. But I also love that you mentioned the impact and being, because the bottom line is like all of the people that are here listening or watching this are in the wellness, health and wellness. They're helping people. You can
Yeah.
help so many more people if you can get in front of them. Like there's people out there who you can help. They have absolutely no idea that you exist, but this is a means of help, of introducing them to what you're doing, and it's just so powerful for those reasons. Not It's not just about like making a bunch more money, although there is that, and that's a
Mhm.
really good thing, but it's so much about like having the impact that you really desire. And I mean, I know I hesitated to use ads in my business for a long time. I stayed organic, I stayed like small. I convinced myself that was where I wanted to stay and it was comfortable and all of that stuff. And then when I started venturing into ads, it just changed absolutely everything. And I really, really recommend it for people who are, at that stage where they're actually, like we said, got the foundation, because it can just completely transform your business.
Yeah, and it gets to a point, and one thing I see a lot with my clients is they get to a point where they're making so much money that they really don't need more money. Like they have the house that they want, they're traveling the way that they want, they're taking care of their families the way that they want to, and it starts to they get just a different kind of fire that was always kind of there, but it's just even bigger now of really carrying out this mission and just seeing how big it's gotten, and wanting to just continue that on and make it bigger and bigger. I mean, there are so many people sitting on their couch right now that have no idea you exist. They're in a dark place. Like they really, really need you. And they're definitely scrolling Facebook and Instagram,
Yes, yes, they
or
are.
TikTok, or yeah, like they're definitely on these platforms. And so whenever you do, dive into something like this where you're expanding that exposure, you really are able to carry out that mission in a way bigger way than you could have maybe ever imagined.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's so true. And it does feel like a leap of faith. And I think that we are, as humans, we're much more concerned about losing something, like taking a risk and losing something, than we are about the potential gain. I think that I've read about that phenomenon many times, that is just our human wiring, is that we're more concerned. We would rather not take a risk if it meant that we were going to potentially lose $20 than do something that could potentially gain us $20. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
we are scared of being like tricked, fooled, swindled. We are more fearful of that than the potential gain. And so recognizing that and finding the courage to actually, take that risk, because the rewards on the other side are potentially huge.
Yeah. I mean, our brains are definitely wired to keep us safe in the cave, no
Yes.
doubt. And one thing is just whenever you do dive into ads, like understand that as long as you have the right people working with you and helping you, and you're using the data, there's really no losing. Like it depends on how you view the loss of money or how long you don't have a return. You're always getting data, you're learning, it's literally paving the path. And it's a lot of
Mhm.
like, this isn't the path, this isn't the path, this isn't the path, along the way. But as long as you're not just like turning on ads and just letting them run and not doing anything about it, like as long as you're using that data, you're getting instant feedback. So you're going to get that feedback from the ads and find your own path, and eventually you will get there. So it's just having that belief that, the pipeline dream, like the amazing picture that we're describing, that will happen. We don't know when it's going to happen for you, but we can make some really good projections with the numbers. But it will happen as long as you're using that data, using those lessons, and just carrying out the process.
Yeah, agreed completely. And you touched on the concept of, not immediately, not right away, and that it's a certain degree of experimentation and figuring out what's going to work for you and your business model, and being willing to, like, okay, well, let's try this variation, let's try this, let's A/B test that, all of that kind of stuff. That's such an important element, I think, that I have found in my own personal experience with advertising. But I think it's scary for a lot of people to feel like, wait, I'm just going to be experimenting with my money now. So
Yep.
what are you trying to say? So can you break that down a little bit more for us and tell us, like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so it's kind of just a frame of mind and understanding that there are going to be times that you're paying for data, but that is how you get to the ATM status. Like
Hmm.
there's no simple, easy shortcut. And I will say it does happen, whenever I've seen people have, funnels and offers that convert and they start ads and they don't really have to go, like their process is like not that hard.
Right.
I have seen that, but it's not always the case. But those paying for that data and or being able to see what the path is or isn't, is honest, it's well worth the money. And as long as you're able to stay in the long game, if you're trying to just jump in and have a crazy big launch and then pull out of ads, you might have a much rockier road. But if you're investing for the long term, even if it's less per month or something like that, so that you can really just stick to the path, once you get to that sweet spot, you're going to look back and realize that like all of that money was so worth it, because now those returns are just going to continue to come every single month.
Yeah, I suspect that there's a lot of people who actually try, like they sort of dabble into it, but they don't, but they get so freaked out by the lack of, quote unquote return coming to them right away. They just abandon it, leave it, and never get to that stage that you just described, where you can see that it actually, all of that investment and all of that trial and error and experimentation phase was actually leading you, the breadcrumbs that was leading you to this state. But I bet a lot of people give up before it ever gets to that stage.
Yeah, and I mean it's really similar to the process of like growing a business and growing a brand and the things
Yeah.
that we go through organically. It's a little bit, or it can be a little bit more painful for people at the time, because you're investing money instead of just, sometimes we value our time more than our money instinctively,
Mhm.
but even though that's not exactly always, accurate, but we just tend to. Money is very tangible, we can see it leaving our bank
Yeah.
account, and it's very hard to watch that happen, which is why the expectations are so important.
Yeah, you're right. Like, people are more willing to, like, give up an hour of their time than a dollar.
Yep.
And that's crazy. And really, when you think about that, because money can always, I always say, it's like that money is a renewable resource. Time is your non-renewable resource. You can't get that hour back. You can't get that day back. You can't get those weeks of struggling away on your own back. You can,
Ever.
if you can't, like, if you do end up investing money that doesn't bring an immediate return, you do have lots of opportunity to get that money back. Like, there's always, and having that mindset, I think, is just so important, and I think will help people to kind of get over that initial fear that they may be feeling. I'd love to also hear a bit about, like, because we mentioned it kind of at the beginning or earlier about the changes. Can you, I mean, I know that this is a huge, like, I don't want to go too far, open this can of worms, but maybe just for people who were like, what are they talking about? Could you just, like, a teeny little glimpse in, like, why things have changed so much just in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so there are definitely lots of changes, but the biggest one is going to be the iOS update. So that happened, it actually took into effect, well, now it's been a year. So that was last summer. And it was rough whenever it happened. But I mean, we knew it was going to happen like probably 8 or so months before it actually did. So we were able to prepare as much as we could. And what this was is that we are not able to rely on pixel tracking as much, which is 100% what we've been relying on, if
Yeah.
not 100%, 90%. And so that has changed a lot in a couple of ways. So, one is visibility, just having our ads being able to see what actually did convert, what is our cost per lead. We're finding other solutions to that. And I think it's actually a great thing. Although it didn't feel like it last year, it might not feel like it right now for some people, but it's going to be a beautiful thing because we're going to find these solutions that are going to be more concrete. They're going to be more stable ways of tracking, and just better ways of like looking at our marketing more holistically. And I think that it's going to go in a better direction. But that is the biggest thing, not being able to track everyone's movement, because you can actually opt out of tracking onto
Mhm.
the apps on your phone. So that like notification that comes up when you opt out, that means that anyone who's advertising to you, if you like sign up for a freebie or something, we might not have been able to actually see that you did that. So we're losing the visibility. And with that, also, there's something called attribution window. And we used to be able to see if someone clicked on an ad or saw an ad, we could tell if they converted within a 28-day period, which this is really helpful for launches because we might launch, promote a webinar for 2 or 3 weeks, and then do the webinar, and then we have our launch for a week or so. And so that can be over a span of a month. So we want to see if that original webinar sign up did actually convert at the end of the launch. We used to be able to see things like that in Ads Manager. We can no longer, and it's now a 7 day period. So and that's if we caught the tracking. So it's the visibility, the ability to track. With that, also, our custom audiences have gotten smaller in some cases, which has affected lookalike audiences. If you're not familiar with those are just different audiences that we create where Facebook keeps track of who is doing what on your in your marketing. So that's probably the biggest thing. There are other things, but those are the biggest things, and that has really changed how we do things, like how we practice ads. So a lot of people might still be doing the same practices before the iOS update and not getting luck with that. So they think that ads don't work. It's not that they don't work anymore. It's just that we have different strategies now to help with these changes.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, it certainly sounds like I mean, these are changes that have made things more challenging, especially immediately when everything was kind of rolling out last year. But what I'm hearing from you is that there are solutions to all of those things, and it's just a matter of if you're willing to be flexible and adjust a few things and manage like your objectives and all of that kind of thing, that it still is worthwhile. We still can get to that promised land. It's just is going to be maybe not quite so like super easy as it was before.
Yeah, a little bit more difficult. And if you're running your own ads, you definitely want to stay on top of these different changes and practices.
Right.
And if you do have an ads manager or an agency, just maybe like make sure that they are doing some really intense skill building. I think I've done more skill building in the past year than I have in my entire career, because there's just been so many things that we need to stay on top of, to make sure that our clients' results don't go down based on all of these changes.
Yeah, understood totally. So, what do you recommend for people who are, who are feeling like, okay, it's actually time, and you kind of feel it when it feels like it's time, right? Okay, it's time. I'm ready. I've got that. Like you said, step one is get a solid foundation going so that your business is working organically, but maybe on a small scale, and you're ready to actually invest some money into ads, and you recognize and you've got your mindset on right in that you are managing your expectations, especially in the beginning, and you are know that it's about reaching for the rewards. And yes, there's going to be some risk in the beginning, but that if you can stick with it and really find the unique solutions for your business, it's going to be worth it. So somebody who's like, okay, I'm ready, what do people do then from there? Like, what's the best way to actually get started?
Yeah, so there's really three main directions that you can go. And so, based on your budget and just kind of where you're at and how much you want to dive into this, will determine which of the three. So, at minimum, I don't really recommend just dabbling in them anymore. A few years
Mhm.
ago, I'd say just go in there and try some stuff, but I wouldn't say that now. It's just it's more complicated than that. So, one thing that you can do, you can still run your own ads, but I would recommend signing up for an intensive. We offer intensives, or find if you know an ads manager or something that you really want to hire eventually, see if they offer intensive. Most of us do.
Mm.
And that way you can have that guidance and they can tell you exactly what to do, and also make sure your account is set up properly, especially your tracking. Just let someone else set up your tracking to make sure that that's in place.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the second thing you could do is have hire an ads manager, maybe a solo ads manager that is just starting
Mhm.
out. That can be an option too. They're going to be a lot cheaper than hiring in a full on agency. And it
Right.
can just get you started, especially if you're doing just some simple campaigns, things like that. And then the third one would be if you are hiring an agency. And that's when you're really just ready to dive in. You have the budget for it. You might not have time or the desire to learn all of this stuff yourself, which is perfectly fine. And so that would be the third option that you could do.
Yeah, I like that. That kind of gives you the option to sort of choose your own adventure depending on, where you're at, what your bandwidth is for time, what your budget is like, all of those kinds of things. So cuz you can get started with ads and there's different ways
Yeah.
to do it. So, wait, just run through those three. So, number 1 was okay, not dabbling, but
Yeah.
number 1 is
Running your own, but doing it with an intensive. So
learning.
getting an
Yeah,
intensive, learning, getting some guidance. The second one would be maybe an entry level ads manager or
right.
someone else that knows a little bit. And then the third would be like go all in, get an agency that knows what they're doing, and let them take care of it.
Yeah, I love that. So you can choose what level are you at, where do you want to invest your time, invest your money, and then go from there. And then you can always, level up your strategy down there if you want to start
Absolutely.
do a bit of learning, do an intensive, do start working on it on your own strategically, but then when you're ready to hand that off to an agency, then I think that would be a very logical way of leveling up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I love it. This has been so fantastic having you here on the podcast, Christina. I really enjoyed it. This has been such a great conversation. And I know that we've brought a lot more clarity to a very confusing and sometimes even scary subject for
Yes.
people. So I would love for you to just tell us where people can go to learn more about you and your work and all of those good things.
Yeah, so you can always go to the website. It's christinabernhard.com, and that has everything there. It has all of our services. We do offer intensives, and we also are an agency, so we have agency services as well. I do also have a monthly membership that has a vault of like tons of trainings. If you are in the DIY stage and you just want to learn, what do I need to do? What do I need to know? That's an option there too. That's on my website. And you can always find me on Instagram. My handle is Christina D. Bernhard. I'm there every single day. So send me a DM, ask me any questions, or just connect with me there.
That's awesome. Okay, I will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes in the description, and so people can easily find you and connect with you and learn from you because you've got a lot of things to share in this space. And we've just kind of scratched the surface here. So yeah,
Yes.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I hope that you found my conversation with Christina valuable, and I hope that you are much clearer now in terms of whether you're ready for ads yet. And if you are, how to conquer the fears that might be holding you back, and know that there are solutions and people out there who can help you, and that the rewards of venturing into ads can be absolutely worth any risk. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. In particular, I'd be curious to know if you are currently using paid ads in your business and why or why not. Go ahead and let me know in the comments below this video, or if you're listening to the audio of this episode, then just find me on Instagram and let me know. Okay, that is what I've got for you today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you again very soon.